2023, 9 a.m. Neighborhood Restoration and Beautification Commission. We'll start with call to order.
Lucas Richardson.
Here.
Jermaine Sullivan.
Here.
Kathleen Grabowski.
Here.
Mary Kay Wilcox.
Here.
Jess Stallings absent.
Next item is public comment on agenda-related items. There's no public in attendance. Moving on. Next, approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, voice vote.
Aye.
Aye.
Approval of meeting minutes from October 16th.
I make a motion to approve minutes from October 16th.
I'll second.
Voice vote, all in favor. Aye. Okay, unfinished business. It was brought up again that the city manager wanted us to discuss the First Street mural that was painted, and we invited the resident that's concerned with the mural and not in attendance tonight. But I think we need to make either a motion to support or something to move forward with this so we can kind of stop talking about it.
Do we know who the person is?
Yeah, yep. You don't have to state it on the record though, I don't think.
So we need a motion to paint over it or leave it to vote?
I personally wanted to have the resident come up here and speak to us because they have not done that yet.
I do too. I don't think we should make a motion until we speak to that person.
I don't think they want to.
I don't know that information I've received that this person would want to publicly speak. That's the way this person was described to me, so.
Well, should Lucas maybe have a conversation with her?
So I reached out to the city manager and we tried to set up a meeting personally, and then the next steps were for them to come and to meet us and kind of explain what they have issues with. And one thing that I kind of thought about over the weekend about this was the city doesn't own that wall, so we would have to certainly talk to the homeowner who gave us permission to paint murals on it and clean it up if we were to move forward with something else. But just with all the positive feedback and all the conversations we've had, I just wanted to bring it up, so.
I've not heard any negative, so that's, except for what we've heard here, everything has been positive on my end that I've heard.
Me too. Yes, ma'am. I must be talking to different people.
So do we want to, how do we want to move forward with this, I guess?
Well, has anybody contacted the homeowner to see what his perspective?
I don't know if we need to necessarily drag him into it since he donated the wall to us for a mural, so I don't think, I think that that's just going to create more issues if we say, do you want it paint over, because
Yeah, I think the issue at hand is looking for the NRBC to make a decision on what to do with the mural, given the information. The city manager has met with the individuals and has met with the city attorney regarding the matter as well. And so I think what everyone is looking for is NRBC to make a decision what to do with the mural. And I think we're at the point now where we either leave it be or we cover it up and move forward. So I think that's where we're at, if I'm clearly describing where
take
we're
a
at.
vote on it to,
I think we should probably vote on it.
Okay, so is there a motion?
Motion to either keep the mural or to, what would we do, cover it with paint? I'm not sure.
So you
what
would
is
make a
the-
motion in one direction or the other to either cover it up or to leave it. It would be a motion. You make it, and either the motion doesn't gain support or it does gain support.
So what would we cover it up with to make it look good, if that was one of the options? Because it's gonna look a little bit,
Oh,
probably a solid color.
my recommendation is if this board decides to cover it up and move forward, is we just paint it a solid color before the snow falls, and when we revisit it this spring, hopefully having some type of mural process in place and decide how we're gonna paint that again, just make it a blank canvas, so to speak, is how that would happen. And if this board decided to cover it up and make it a canvas, I'm sure we could find 1 or 2 people just to go out there and do it very quickly. So that shouldn't be an obstacle at all, as far as the how.
I think that, in my perspective too, if we do decide to paint over it, then we will not be doing any murals. This is my personal stake in this,
Well, I
because
think-
there's always gonna be one person over and over again
Well, I
that's gonna
think
have.
if we had our ducks in a row with the murals, I think we'd done that.
Well, I mean, and we talked about this before, we even had the artists come up, tell us, what they're gonna do, give us, sketches and ideas, and, I mean, what more could we have done other than going through every piece of artwork in the world to make sure?
We probably would have had to get maybe that person's acknowledgement. I don't know, I have no idea.
Make a suggestion. It was just an idea that I had. So are we just talking about the ship? Or are we talking about the whole thing? The welcome to Manistee?
At this point, I don't even know.
Yeah. But on the ship part, what if you just, like on either side of the ship, where the green is, the trees, painted bands of white. So it's just the Manistee with a little bit of the bridge. Then it's not reminiscent of her picture anymore. It's a ship that's no longer in commission, will never come to Manistee again. Yet it's memorialized on the wall.
I like that idea.
I mean, I don't know if she would go for that.
Well, that's the point too, is I don't know if that's acceptable.
Right.
So if.
That was just an idea that I
If we
had.
put that effort into it and then it's still a complaint.
Right, but yeah, you would have to talk to her and get her input,
Right.
I guess.
Making a motion, Mary, to,
I mean, I don't know if we should just keep it till spring and see what happens, or if we try to call her and invite her again. I mean, Mary's daughter's done so much work and effort, it's beautiful. I mean, I've only heard positive things. I mean, I myself would hate to just cover it up without some acknowledgement from her. I mean, it's just a bunch of hearsay. I mean, I don't know.
I think we extended our invite to discuss it with the parties that are complaining. And
So to be clear, she wants it covered up. This board has all the clear facts based on conversation with the city attorney and with the city manager with her. It was made clear to me that she wants it covered up. Just so we understand without her being here.
Would not work.
not work.
I don't believe so. We know that this artist's photograph was used at least to inspire the painting. And just for what it's worth, the board, based on conversations I've had with the city manager and with the city attorney, I would recommend that we just cover this up and move forward instead of sinking a bunch more time into discussing it and meeting. And I think it falls in line with what this group, the vision of this group is developing a mural process and policy. So I think we covered up as I had before, and we look at maybe a good opportunity to apply hopefully a policy or procedure that we establish this winter for next spring. I think it's a good platform to start that. That's just my 2 cents.
And what color are we gonna do that, if that's the thing? That would look presentable, nice, as you're moving up and down that street.
I think any color looks better than the way it looked before we power washed it, if I'm being honest.
Well, I just don't want it to
I
look
would
like
not suggest white, because if you put white there, you're inviting a
Graffiti.
graffiti artist to just tag the wall. I mean, I would say gray, like the rest of the wall.
Question, they both have to come down? Both pictures?
I assume they both do. I would assume.
There's no evidence to support that the other photograph, she didn't, you don't have to take both of them down.
You don't?
No.
She's not upset about it.
This local artist is contesting the picture of the Manistee ship, just to be clear for this group.
make a motion?
I'll make a motion to paint over the wall. Mural.
And to be clear, you want to paint over the ship or the entire wall?
Paint the whole thing.
Okay.
And apologize to Katie. I mean, she did a great job.
Mhm.
Spent a lot of time on it, so, yeah.
I think we should also vote for a color, because I don't want it to be like pink or green or,
Well, there's a motion on the table right now to paint over the entire wall, correct?
Yes,
And so is there any support for that motion?
I support it.
Well, it's your motion. Is there anyone that supports that motion?
Okay, so we're not painting over it.
I'm waiting to hear if anyone supports the motion.
you know, I understand, but it looks bad for the NRBC, I think, and, you know, we haven't, I know everybody else has had conversation, but we haven't. I've only gotten feedback of positive, so I understand, but, and I know we need to lay this to rest, but also gonna look going down now with just black or whatever color we choose, you know.
Support? No? Maybe no? No?
No support, the motion fails.
Yep, so we're gonna move on. Okay,
So just clear direction from this group is deciding to leave it as is?
correct. All right, spring cleanup project. City manager reached out to Republic Services and got numbers that we were requesting for dumpsters for the spring. So they're laid out there under number 3. So it would be $5.95 per haul for each dumpster, $60 per ton extra if the dumpsters are overfilled, and then $35 one-time charges for each delivery. So totaling $630 a piece if they're not overfilled. And so city manager wanted us to make a recommendation for a location, maybe like set a date, and then also how many dumpsters that we think we would need.
That's nice.
So this is kind of open for discussion. I know we kind of talked about it a few months ago, and I think we wanted to target a couple areas, like one on the north side, one on the south side. Maybe that would be a good idea, and then we can kind of start planning for
So are we?
how that day's gonna be.
Maybe latter part of April, first part of May, maybe, because the snow is still iffy.
Yeah, maybe first part of May,
Yeah,
is kind
that'd
of
be
what I
nice.
thought. And then, are we thinking like a weekend? I think that's like a over the whole weekend thing, over on a Saturday thing. Let's pick a date. Like May 3rd, maybe?
Gonna do it like that one day, or that week, that third and fourth, or fifth, or?
I don't know, what's everybody's thoughts? I don't know. I think, when they do the metal, do they do that a day or is that a weekend? The recycling event?
I think that's a one-day thing. Isn't that a one-day?
Be easier to coordinate it
I think
probably.
we should just do it. Because what if that dumpster gets really full and then we don't have another one?
So we say, what, like 8, just any time on Saturday, and then we can work
Well, I
out the
think we should
logistics?
figure out time.
So they would deliver it on that Saturday morning or something, and then
Well, if
take
they
it
can
away
do it
Saturday?
early. Yeah, if they can do it early, don't you
Yeah,
agree?
yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So maybe like a 8 to 4 or something? Okay.
What's the location?
We have to pick that, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the backup plan if nobody uses it? Because we got the one donated for Casman and it was
Half
not
full.
even a quarter full.
Well, I think we really need to put it on social media, put it in the paper, we need to start promoting it right away, like they do for the recycling. You know,
Mhm.
start promoting it like 3 months in advance or something, like make it a big to-do.
Yeah, so we had one dumpster that got half full, for an area that was probably not even, probably like 5% of the city. So,
Is it something that we could do and coordinate with maybe the Manistee Senior Center? You know, I mean, on the north side.
in that parking lot, you're saying? Oh, that's a good idea.
I don't know, and then maybe if we do the center of the town, we could do maybe coordinate with St. Joseph, because they have another big parking lot. I'm thinking of going in and out easily,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a good one too.
Or Duffy even. Duffy
Yeah,
Park.
somewhere where it's easy access in and out, and not create a hiccup.
Duffy would eliminate kind of coordination with the senior center, you know, maybe because it's on city property.
Yeah.
And then what about for like the south side? No, city manager recommended the armory.
That would be good too.
That kind of is a ways away from the southeast part of town though.
And maybe even the old Civic Club, you know where that is? You know, down on Vine Street,
On where?
Vine Street,
Yeah.
Oh,
the old
That
Civic
would be
Club.
that'd be a good place, right in the middle there.
that's what, 10th and Vine? Do we,
Down?
is that's not Civic Club anymore though, right? That
No,
used to be
it
a
was-
drug rehab.
Right. I know it's up for sale, but it could be maybe a possibility.
What about the, it's right around the corner from there, 9th Street Boat Launch?
Yeah.
Big parking lot right there.
That'd be good too.
So you got some ideas. And then, how many dumpsters do we think? And then I guess I missed out on this. The city manager said that there would be money in the refuse fund for paying for this, so we wouldn't necessarily have to use the NRBC. And if you remember, we did talk to the community foundation about this could be something that the Limitless Fund grant could support, so maybe we could do some research into that too.
Should probably figure out how much money we have then before we decide how many to get.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe we can start with a ballpark on what our thoughts are and then kind of work backwards on the money. I don't know, I'm thinking like 3 in each spot. Do you think that's too much, too little?
So 9?
Three- Oh, I guess, yeah. Are we thinking two locations or 3? Let's,
I don't know, you
I
bring
think we should
Buffalo.
do one on each, you know, like center and, you know, three locations maybe. Maybe 2 dumpsters each.
2 each, maybe.
And you know how they used to do like the spring cleanup and talk to people, you know, put it out there on social media. Well, we didn't do social media then, but you know what I mean? They put it in the paper, on the radio, whatever.
Mhm.
So maybe if we say this is kind of like the cleanup, give them a list of what we're going to accept.
So we're thinking 9th Street Boat Launch, the Armory, Duffy Park. Okay. May 3rd, 8 to 4. So 6 of them would be 3780.
What is that?
May 3rd is a Friday.
So we want the 4th then with us.
Oh, it is? Whoops. May 4th. All right, May 4th, 8 to 4, Ninth Street Boat Launch, the Armory, Duffy Park, 2 apiece, $3,780. Does that sound reasonable? And then we can kind of work on the logistics over the winter here and, okay.
I think maybe we could even start, once we know for sure we can do that, we could start promoting it
Mhm.
on our, on our receipt.
So I guess where we can go from here is I can bring this back to city manager and see his thoughts on how we should proceed, but maybe we should just have like a motion of support for this event. So I'll make a motion.
I'll support.
Okay, all in favor, voice vote? Aye?
Aye.
Okay. All right. New business, ordinance review. So chapter 650, anti-blight. So I'm just gonna go through it the same way that we did last time, if that's okay. So skipping to the prohibited conduct, 650-03. Do we want, I know we just kind of received it, but did we have time to review it from the email to go through it? Okay. So is there any comments on A? B?
I don't.
C? D? E? Okay, moving on to enforcement. So A, I have a comment, so I just know that this does say, each day a violation under this ordinance continues to exist may be considered a separate violation. So I know we've talked about in the past, how does it, after something's been enforced, does it just extend that period, or is it a new violation? So this cleared that up for me at least. On B, Mary, you talked about concerns the last time we talked about ordinances about how blight couldn't be put onto the taxes, but it looks to me that it says that in here on the second line. Said costs may be added to the tax roll for the property where the violation occurred as a special assessment or a lien against the property as may otherwise be provided in law. Josh, haven't we talked about this not being how we move forward with this in the court process?
Yeah, I don't know what they mean by special assessment there. I think we need some definitions from, it would be great to have the city attorney here to help us kind of flesh some of this out. The way I read that, the cost may be added to tax roll for the property where the violation occurred as a special assessment. So for me, I would have to see, I need someone to define what special assessment is to see if that's the same thing we're talking. And if there is a path for special assessment, who can describe that path to us and how can we get it done? Maybe this is the second time, maybe a third time we've seen that in ordinance. And our understanding from the city attorney was that they can assess this on taxes, but the language seems to indicate that, so maybe I'm not understanding the language. So it would be great to have the city attorney come in here and explain what that means, help give some clarity to this.
Yeah, I'm confused on that too, because it does say that. It also says that in the weeds ordinance, and we do put grass cutting and stuff on the tax roll, so.
Blight
And
is just-
they're worded exactly the same, so I'm confused on that.
It seems like it'd be fairly easy to separate the cost too, because it says later in that paragraph, it says the cost of enforcement and prosecution shall be the actual amount of attorney fees and out-of-pocket expense for enforcement of the ordinance. So I don't know, maybe it's something that's above this ordinance that, you know, we're missing, but if our ordinance is reading something that can't be done, then definitely should be looked at, right?
Right.
So maybe that can get brought up in the ordinance committee next time we meet.
So
Okay,
I'm gonna jump around a second. So on chapter 1454, dangerous, unsightly, and unsanitary conditions, it goes hand in hand with blight, but I'm confused on number 1. It shall be the duty of the city council to determine by resolution when a condition exists upon any premises, lot, or parcel of land within the city limits that is dangerous, unsightly, or unsanitary, constitutes a menace to health and safety of the citizens to and any adjoining property. And then it goes on to council resolutions, notice to correct violations. So I don't even know what this is.
So basically, there's two paths to deeming a house unsafe. And the two paths, you're quoting the building maintenance code for the city, and one path is to bring it in front of council, the other path is to bring it in front of a judge. And our city attorney, I know, has preferred to bring it in front of a judge versus bringing all these in front of council.
Okay.
He has preferred for a judge to deem something uninhabitable or order something to be tore down or remedied. He thinks that's probably a better path. That way, well, he believes that's a better path. Because I read the same thing years ago going, oh, we can have this in front of city council if we're not getting the speed that you want. Now, two things, I don't know that we want to parade a bunch of these in front of city council as they already have enough in front of them. Number two, I would probably agree with the city attorney that it's better to have a detached, neutral judge make a decision on this based on the evidence presented to he or she. But again, might be a conversation as we go into our off-season, the wintertime, and look at our policies or our ordinances to see, to maybe get some clarity from our city attorney.
yeah, it seems like, because we've talked about in the past, it's been, some of the blight cases have gotten to where they have, and then it gets in front of the judge, and then it doesn't go forward. So it seems like that could be
It typically
way to-
gets extension, and if they don't adhere to the extension, then we have to take them back to court and notice them back to court. So it doesn't happen very quickly at all. I mean, again, I've got my soapbox here before. We've had one house that we've had an officer sink tons of hours in for 3 years. And so, again, I think it's a great opportunity to have this discussion with the city attorney for his thoughts on this and maybe to get some clarity on that path versus city council path. So,
Yeah, I would be curious to see if having a resolution or some sort of resolution of support for going about a blighted case differently than just the court process, like if the judge had that council resolution of support in front of them when they make the judgment, if that would change the verdict, maybe it would help. I don't know. Maybe that's a
me
question.
personally, I don't think it
That's a
would.
question for-
I don't think the judge would care what city council says. The judge is to look at facts and look at it objectively. But just my experience, 20 years in law enforcement, I don't think, it wouldn't hold any more weight. But again, those are conversations we can have with the city attorney to see what his thought process is and what he would recommend. And
Okay.
I saw that too. I know it's building maintenance code and the police department doesn't deal with that, but we have been dealing with it for 3 years to say, hey, if we aren't getting the results we want, can we run this through city council? Not that I want to inundate city council with a bunch of unsafe structures. That's what sparked that conversation with the city attorney saying, well, in the spirit of due process and property rights of our citizens, it's probably better to go through a judge. So, okay, makes sense.
So basically, we need to find out if we can put the cost of the tickets and violations on the tax roll, because I think that would be,
That's the conversation. Like I said, our city attorney doesn't know there's, I don't think he supports that. He doesn't know how to do that. There's a legal path to do that. But the question is looming out here. If we can't do that, we probably should take it out of the ordinance so that in 10 years, when we have different members, it doesn't read that we have the option because it kind of sends a mixed signal, I think. So maybe some clarity provided by him.
I'm just confused on why we could put weeds on the tax roll but not a blight violation. I don't understand.
I don't know that you're alone in that. I don't know how you can have one without the other. The spirit behind the grass cutting is you didn't cut your grass, so now city is going to cut your grass, and if you don't clean the junk in your yard, the city has to pay for someone to do it themselves. To me, it seems very similar. So I can't give you any clarity, but I think there's some confusion there. And so if we can't do it, we can't do it, we need to move forward, but if we can do it, we need to explore that path. That's kind of where we're at.
But nobody knows where it says we can't do it?
The city attorney doesn't know of a legal path to do that, to get that done. So that's probably a conversation we should have with him. And if we are, I don't know, I think there's a transition right now with city attorneys, I think. And so we should probably get them in here sooner than later. So we'll try to get them in here the next meeting, but it's very important based on the work that this group is doing to look at these ordinances and then take back to ordinance committee to get that direction, to get that clarity. Certainly for the sustainability of taxpayer money, you know, if you have to use taxpayer money to tear a house down and it goes on a lien and we never recoup those liens as a cost, then it's taxpayer money you don't get to recoup, or that fund isn't sustainable necessarily. Whereas if it goes in the tax roll, and let's say that person doesn't pay their taxes, well, Manistee County buys up all of our tax debt, so we would get those funds in theory anyways. But if we can't get there legally, then we can't get there. But we need, at this point, an attorney to tell us that, our city attorney.
My confusion is when ordinances are created, isn't it either created or there's assistance from an attorney to create the ordinances?
Yeah, the city attorney did this one. He and I worked on it.
If we have an ordinance that's written by an attorney, how can we say that it's not? I don't know. That's just
I think what we're
confusing.
doing is we're taking the language and asking for a little clarification on the language.
Yeah.
We might interpret it one way, but he might come back and say, well, a special assessment is A, B, and C, and we say, oh, okay, we didn't understand that. So just some clarity.
Okay. All right, well, I made a note here for talking about chapter 650.04B.
Yeah. And so just a side note here, I get a lot of feedback saying, well, isn't blight subjective? Isn't structural blight subjective? What structural blight is defined right here. Let's say, for example, someone's handrail in front of their house is peeling. Is that blight? Well, I would say, let's look at the ordinance. If it's not covered by ordinance, the answer is no. So sometimes we get caught in this unsightliness versus ordinance blight, and so we have to be careful there. If someone has paint on their house chipping, is that blight? Well, I would say, well, let's look at the ordinance to see if it's covered, because if it's not covered by ordinance, we certainly cannot enforce it. And so a lot of things we look at is the structure is not weather tight, waterproof, or vermin proof. Okay, well, is peeling paint off a siding, is that weather tight? No. Yes, it is. Is it vermin proof? Yes, it is. Is it structurally sound? Yes, it is. Is it not covered by water resistant paint or other? Now we look at go, well, if it's peeling off, it's not. So again, when we hear, well, isn't blight just subjective? I would say no, it's defined. Because it's not defined by this or any of the other ordinance that applies to it, then it's not blight. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like a lot of our severe cases that are obvious and seem to not move as fast as the community wants go under that 3. The weather tight.
Yeah, I don't think
that siding issues and.
When it comes to structural blight, I don't think they've moved fast as anyone wants.
Right.
And so I think that's why it's such a a big boost to have a building official and staff now who can handle structural blight. And so instead of a police officer saying it's blight and then having to contact whatever safe built worker happens to be working for us and then making sure they get permits, and then instead of managing all that, we're going back to the way it was when Mark Neeson was here. You have the same staff member that says, you need to put siding on there. By the way, here's how you get a permit for it. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do this. By the same staff member, and instead of expecting our police officers to somehow manage all that. I think that's part of the challenge has been that way. You know, to have a police officer say, hey, pick that mattress up or get that junk vehicle, that's one thing. But to have them say, your house is blighted, and then to have them argue whether it's uninhabitable and then coordinate with two other parties, it's not been a process. They've done a great job trying to do that. And that's why I appreciate the city and the city manager's vision of bringing that position back in-house so it's much more smooth and efficient, whether it be owner-occupied, a rental. I expect that process to be a lot more streamlined in communication. And so just know that right now we're in that transition where we have that staff member, but they've just come aboard. And so in the off-season, meaning the wintertime, we'll be updating them from a police department standpoint as far as what residents should be priorities. We've already had this conversation, but again, us doing everything we can from a police department perspective to put that employee in a position to be successful at structural blight. So, but again, back to my original point, I hear a lot of, well, chief, isn't that, what exactly is blight? And, well, there's no real definition. I say there absolutely is a definition. I worked on it myself with the city attorney 3 years ago. So, and if this group doesn't like the definition, I certainly welcome changes to bring to ordinance committee. If there's something that we're seeing that we want to change, I would bring it here. So really chew on this. Now if you look at number 5, I'm not a licensed contractor, obviously, but constitutes blight under provision of Michigan Blight Area Rehabilitation. This is an act that also has additional definitions in there. That even goes further to define this. So I would recommend, this group to really chew on this to see, okay, is there a scenario outside of a definition, a structured find here, that we want to add to this? If the answer is no, then, George Taylor and I revamped this ordinance, number 1, to make it more streamlined, faster for officers. Number 2, to define it a little better. If we don't have a problem definition, let's leave this thing be and work on some of the other issues that we're trying to work out, is how we recoup costs if we have to. Does that make sense?
I think there needs to be a section added to this blight, the ordinance, because you're reading it and it's mostly blighted structures. Like, there needs to be a section for yard blight, like couches, mattresses, garbage.
I think that's defined in a separate ordinance, and to your point, I think there needs to,
There's the building materials too,
so I think to your point,
but junk is.
there is a junk and a junk vehicle. To your point you made last time, maybe we should consolidate these ordinances. This is anti-blight, so anything that we determine to be blight should probably be listed in 650, whether it be structural blight, junk vehicles, couches, whatever. I would certainly support taking these 3 or 4 different ordinances over here and conduce them, say, hey, there's one location to find out against blight and it's 650.
Yeah.
There's a chapter for junk vehicles blight, is that what you said?
Yep,
This is so
That doesn't make
ridiculous.
any
Why?
sense.
we went over it last time.
We did?
So the unsightly and unsanitary conditions, that has, unsanitary conditions is kind of,
Well, if you look under definitions and you look under D, it says junk. You see that?
Oh, it's 415, okay.
And it says any abandoned, discarded, unusable, blah, 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 equipment, not limited to furniture, stoves, refrigerators, freezers, all of that. You see that? 650.2, and then it's D. Junk.
Oh, yeah, yep.
So maybe that could be coordinated with the blight structure and put.
that should be on your tax rolls, like,
Yeah, that
not the
whole-
structures, because.
That whole thing should be. Yep.
Yeah, I guess I totally missed that when we were reviewing it last time. The chapter 415 is open storage of disabled, inoperable, junked, and abandoned motor vehicles. And that seems like that entire ordinance should be in 650.
You could, to the mayor's point, you could cut that and paste in this ordinance, revise it to 23, and then before you do that, make sure, so you're not swinging this thing every 2 years, make sure there's nothing else out there, and then when someone comes to us and says, what exactly is blight? Say, everything you need to know about blight is 650.
Right.
It's labeled anti-blight.
I mean, how many chapters do we have? 7,000 that are repeats of? It's so ridiculous. All this stuff should be under blight, because if somebody's looking up blight, they shouldn't have to
You're
go
never gonna know
to
to-
unsanitary conditions and then weeds and then,
Yeah, I would never have thought to open storage of disabled, inoperable, junked, and abandoned motor vehicles.
so stupid.
Well, it's a good thing to bring up to the ordinance committee for sure.
So is that a recommendation this group would like to bring to the ordinance committee to consolidate, especially blight, if we have other, is that what I'm hearing? I'm not putting words in your mouth, but
I think so, yeah.
if you, and I would encourage all of our commissioners to just look at our codified ordinances. There's administrative code, traffic code, general offenses, planning, zoning, all these different things. And general offenses usually is what the police department deals with. And you'll see this, and so you see anti-blight. And so I certainly would support the mayor's opinion that let's make this a little bit consolidated so that we can at least point people, well, what really is blight? Well, look at 650, they should cover it all. If that makes 650 4-page ordinance, then so be it.
Yeah.
But as we're tackling what is blight and what the process is, we also need to tackle the cost recovery process. It all needs to be put to bed at the same time. And I just assume if this is gonna be revised, make it so that it's a livable document that we don't have to look at every 2 years. So,
I know that you've went over this a gazillion times, but can you like summarize the steps real quick of what you do for blight?
so what kind of blight?
So say yard blight, like,
So typically our officers would make contact and tell them to pick up, and they have X amount of days to pick it up.
okay,
If they don't do it in the past, what we've done is wrote them a city ordinance citation as a way to help motivate them. Usually people have to receive a citation before they will do anything. And again, I want to be clear, I'm speaking generalities here. I'm not saying every case.
okay.
You said a city ordinance citation, is that what you said?
It's a municipal citation.
Okay.
What we found is that people generally won't pay, citation won't pay it, and so then we end up having to go back if they don't pay the citation or clean up the blight. We have to go back and write them a state ticket. A state ticket is similar to what you would get if you get a seatbelt ticket. And what that does is give them a notice to appear, a court date in court. And so, as you can see, even with the streamlined process, by the way, the process prior to this was a lot longer than this. We had to mail them letters. So this is even a streamlined process. We're streamlining it even further. If this is a continued problem, we're not writing a municipal citation because we found that's a waste, that's an exercise in futility.
Take that out.
We are not doing that. We are skipping right to a state ticket. And we're looking to see if we can get the magistrate to give us the following order. Either property owner, you clean it up, or the city can clean it up within X amount of days. And the challenges we find is when we get to that position, and guess what? There are people who won't clean it up because they'll argue it's not blight. It's this, that. It's finding contractors to do it because I don't support the DPW doing it. They have enough to do and we don't need city workers. And then where does that money come from? And then we're back to the same conversation. How do we recoup those costs other than putting a lien on the property? And so that's basically the process, which sounds, okay, that's not a bad process. When you times that times 30 or 40, it becomes quite the process.
You said that the city or a contractor would clean it up. I know that in the weeds, it specifically says that. specifically says that the city employees will enter upon any such lands and cause, I'm sorry, it's, basically to clean it up, right?
Yeah, we don't, yeah, that's something
Should
that
that should be something that gets added if we're gonna be tweaking the
we,
650?
for structure blight,
The yard
for
blight or-
junk vehicles?
Yeah,
I
junk-
wouldn't support that. I don't support
No.
DPW workers going and hauling trash off somebody's property.
Contractor though, like, should it be a contractor and then,
We can, but we get court orders, so it makes the ordinance moot because we get a court order for that to happen.
okay. What
Is that-
happens when you get the court order though? Like, who is the one that goes and does that?
Well, the police chief puts out bids and we go that whole process, yeah.
Okay.
We've had this conversation and each case is kind of different. If it's cutting the grass, obviously that's a light lift and the DPW does that every day in the spring, so, but in a case that we had just recently, when you have a backyard full of trash and stoves and everything else under the sun, I would caution the city from using DPW for that. I mean, so it's case by case.
So the contractor would go do it and then.
We pay the
somebody from
contractor.
police would be there to.
It depends on case, but if there's possible danger, and a lot of these are, to be frank with you, I manage that from the police department standpoint. So,
So we would have to get rid of the citation section of that, we need to update the procedure. Because is it in there that you need to give a citation?
what we have, which one are we on now? Are we on structural blight or are we on,
I was on like the garbage blight, yard blight.
let's go to enforcement. I don't know that we put in there.
Yeah, there's like nothing about the procedure in there.
Right here, whoever violates the provision of this chapter is responsible for municipal civil infraction in accordance with 203, which is our fines and costs, including the ability of the city of Manistee to seek equitable remedies available in addition to all other sanctions provided in 203.
It's pretty generic.
Yeah, doesn't say much.
So again, after doing this for 3 years and doing it a lot, we have found that generally speaking, municipal civil infractions have not been effective because if I write you a municipal civil infraction and you say, oh, I'm not going to pay it, there's not really a consequence. And so, with the goal in mind to get this problem fixed, it's either you clean it up or the city's gonna clean it up. And so, that's kind of what we've gotten over the last 3 years. Now, just to be clear, there are people who clean things up, but there are also a lot of time, and why you still see junk around, people will argue that's not junk. We'll point to the ordinance. And we, as a police department, kind of shy away from unsightly because the word unsightly is subjective. If you got broken stuff in your yard, it's hard to argue that that is not junk. If you've got a grill or a mattress or a couch or whatever, that's hard to argue from an objective standard that that is not junk. So that's kind of the position we've had. We also get complaints about things in fenced-in backyard. I know they got junk vehicles back there. If they're not visible to the public, then we can't prioritize those. So that's more than what you asked for. But
So I have a question on the penalty as well. So is there a way that we could somehow put in the penalty that a homeowner can't sell the premise if they have an open blight ticket? Because I know we've talked about several owners, selling a blighted property over and over and over again.
So what you're talking about there is you're talking about controlling what someone does with a private property. And I would certainly get the city attorney involved in that conversation. Me personally, I think if the NRBC would go that direction, it would be a separate ordinance. The city of Muskegon has such an ordinance. When Kevin Kriebel was here, he talked about that, where there's a process if you have blight to your home and and you would try to sell it to another person, there has to be a plan in place about how that blight is gonna be remedied. That is one of the most challenging things in Manistee is these blighted homes, and I'm talking structural blight here, I'm not talking about junk.
Right.
I'm talking specifically structural blight. They keep selling, and so it slows the process down because technically you have to serve the new owners, find out who they are, and so their due process is honored and respected. You have to serve them with court notices. And I mentioned the house on 8th Street that's gone through I don't know how many owners in 3 years, and we keep spinning our wheels. So
Yeah, it seems
that
like
might be
would
something
help. Right.
that we reach out to other communities and see, okay, what do they do with this, and how does this work there, and to see if that's something the NRBC. First of all, you need to find out, number one, is it constitutional? If the answer is no, then it's a moot point, we're done. But if there is a path to that, and NRBC wants to explore that path, I would get the city attorney involved.
Yeah, it seems like what you said, it would make more sense to maybe not address the blight if it's, you know, a structured blight, you know, if it's not feasible to do that, but to make it so that way the police department doesn't have to restart the process every single time. Maybe it's, I don't know if it's disclosed when you buy a blighted property that it is blighted. It's
Well, I mean, if you
So
see
that's-
I mean, I'm not a realtor, but when you see the property to buy it, don't you see it, or is that not how it happens?
I understand that, but like for them to at least know that it's like in the process or
Okay.
somehow to put that into that process, I think would help. So you wouldn't have to restart over and over.
Another issue is, you know, a challenge we found is if a bank owns a property, who's responsible for remedying the property? I would say the bank is. Is there a path to do that? I can think of 4 houses right now. Well, there were 4 houses. If the bank owns a property and they are the owners, they should remedy the blight because it is the community that, you know, so again, these are all issues that we should really have meaningful conversations with the city attorney. Again, the first question is always, is this constitutional? And if the answer is no, then the conversation's over. If the answer is yes, then we figure out a path if the NRBC so chooses. That kind of ties into the same conversation that this group has been bouncing around about having a vacant building ordinance. Okay, in some communities up north, I can't remember offhand where, in their downtown district, there's a penalty for having a building vacant for a year. And again, Kevin Kriebel from Safe Built brought this to us. I can't remember what community it was, but that might be another thing that this group wants to explore. At least ask the question with the current city attorney, hey, is this possible? Is this legal? If the answer is no, then we're done. If the answer is yes, then figure out a path if this group so chooses.
It
This all
seems
ties into, you know, what we're doing in the off season to make the ordinances more specific, better, more efficient, so that essentially the citizens are served so we can clean some of these houses up.
It seems like it'd be a little bit more clear to the public if the procedures, the schedules, all that stuff would be laid out in the ordinance.
What schedule is that?
Like you said, you contact the owner and you get a schedule to remedy the blight, right?
It's case by case. You can't have a blanket for everything. So if I'll give you 7 days. If I was an officer, I'll give you 7 days to get that mattress out of your yard. But to put siding in your house, to give you 7 days is unreasonable, correct? So it depends on what the blight is, and that's discretion of the officer. Or structural blight, discretion of the building official.
Can't we separate those though? Like, have it for structural and then have it for,
Yeah, no more than a year for structural or something, and then no more than a week for junk blight.
I would think you would leave that to the discretion of the enforcement officer, based on what they're seeing.
What about specifically just for the structural? You still think that would be subjective? I mean, a year to do some sort of structural?
Would you give the same time for someone to put one window in as you would to replace the roof? Is that the same timeline? Those are questions you gotta look at.
Right, that's a good point.
That's why when you have like an enforcement official is there saying, listen, based on what I'm seeing here, you should have this done in 2 weeks. Versus, this is probably a 3-month process, let's do this, this, and that. I think you need to leave that up to the enforcement, because when it goes in front of a judge ultimately, if we don't get compliance, they all lay out the timeline to the judge. So I would leave that to the, I don't wanna say experts, but those who are in that field.
So the enforcement officer basically creates a schedule, and then if it's not hit, that's when it's brought into court. I see. Okay. Any more on 650? Do you want one of us to come and support any of this for the ordinance committee, or?
No, it'll come back to city council.
Okay.
But if you are gonna recommend something to the ordinance committee, I would make their job easier. Recommend something very specific, meaning this section going here. I would have a draft document, say, this here, get rid of this, have something. Don't give them this, go, hey, we think you should consolidate these. That's just my recommendation.
Yeah.
Make their job easier by going, we think it should say this, and this section go here, this, put it together that way. That's what I would recommend.
Make it to the point where they could vote on it.
You do that for me and then I'll bring it in.
I can help you with that if you want. Let me know if you want me to help you with that.
Well, that's the easier way. I was just gonna go in there and be like, hey, let's
Other people
consolidate
do it
this,
for
this,
me.
and this, and add this.
Okay. All right, 692 weeds. Okay. So noxious weeds, prohibited height limits. Any comments on 01? Okay, duty of occupant or owner, 02.
It shall be the duty of the owner and occupant of every parcel in the city to cut and remove all such noxious weeds, grass, vegetation, and brush as often as may be necessary to comply with, basically making sure it's not 10 inches. Does everyone agree with the height?
It's reasonable, yeah.
So this is something that's managed by the DPW. I think their secretary sends out a letter, and we see it right here.
And this should also be kind of looked at when the new building inspector looks at houses too, right? Or he could notice that when he goes out and does inspections.
Yeah, I think anyone in the world can send this to the DPW.
Yeah.
So there was 2 years ago, I had an officer take 30 minutes of his shift and just drive around, make a list, and give it to DPW. I mean, anyone can report this. My opinion as a person who's a police chief and as a city resident is two things really look bad is when we have high growth in the city right of way and we have these structural blights that when you drive down, you can feel it. Mm-hmm. So that's just my opinion. And so anyone can report this. Seek, click, fix. Anyone who has any contact should be reporting these.
So I have a comment on the third section.
Mhm.
So it's kind of the same concept that I was thinking for the blight, but would there be a way to require that the sidewalks be clear of weeding and edging? I mean, it seems like every project that we have a volunteer project, that's what we're doing.
But does that dip into the maintenance of the sidewalk in the previous ordinance?
Maybe, yeah, right?
And the question is this, but not to pick at this, but someone who's written hundreds of policies. So maintaining a sidewalk, does that mean maintaining the structure of the sidewalk or maintaining the weeds and the cracks? What does maintaining a sidewalk mean? Is it clearly defined in ordinance? Is that something that we need to?
I think sidewalks needs to be one of the next ones we look at, because that's a pretty hot topic.
But here's the deal. Well, I mean, it's two different things. So maintaining a sidewalk, and this is something this group, what does that mean? Does it mean grinding down to the level or fixing broken sidewalk? Or does it mean when you have weeds growing up between the segments, or like we do, we edge it, is that maintaining a sidewalk? So I think that's something that'll probably have to be defined.
Yeah, because right now it's really vague, is your point, right, in the ordinance?
Sure.
So what is the cost if someone doesn't cut their weeds? What is that cost? Is there a specific cost?
It's in the fee schedules.
The hourly rate or whatever, and it's,
Okay. So do most people come in and pay this? Do you know?
We don't manage. This is managed by DPW as it should be, yeah.
I think that is put on the tax roll.
It is.
Yes.
It is. I just
Yeah.
wondered, is it like $50 or,
I think this is one of the ordinances that is coming on a study session on the 14th.
So a city council study session?
For weeds or sidewalks?
Oh,
Both, I think, it was weeds and sidewalks.
I think it's important when we have our city council have study sessions, anything related to potential blight, that we have a representative. I mean, I guess we do, but maybe we should evaluate if there needs to be a public comment on where the NRBC sits on it. That's just my opinion, just to help give them direction on some conversations we've had here. Unless the mayor, you feel comfortable doing that, but I think they need to hear, if we're discussing a subject here, because our job is ultimately to make recommendations to city council for things that could prevent, eliminate, remedy blight, right? They should hear from the NRBC. So I leave it to you, Mayor, if you think it's appropriate for you to say the NRBC thinks A, B, and C, or have someone come make a public comment.
I think it would be appropriate for somebody to make a public comment.
Right,
yes.
just so something to think about.
I think that the 7-day written notice should be shortened to, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, by the time you actually see it, then you go report it to DPW, and then you get the letter sent out. It's probably already a couple days, right?
So should we find out how they landed on 7 days first? Let's figure out, that's why, they might have, and this is what I found, they might have a really good reason why there's a number, and maybe we get asked, why is it 7 days? And the answer might say, well, we need, based on that logic, we want to change it. Or maybe we go, okay, I didn't think about that. Let's leave it be. Does that make sense? I mean, that's kind of.
So what's your recommendation to bring up for public comment?
4 or 5 days.
Uh,
For everything else?
Mhm. You're just saying like our comments from today's meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. Anyone else have anything on that ordinance? No. All right, moving on. Public comment. Still no public in present. Go to the order. Mary?
I'm all set.
Kathy?
All set.
So I have a couple things. I went to a conference a couple weeks ago, and other communities, I mean, they have a ton of stuff that they were doing to beautify their cities and stuff. A couple of the suggestions were for one of our projects, maybe painting the sewer grates. Yeah, I don't know what the thing is called that sits.
Catch basins?
Yeah, to clean those up, paint those. Some cities have painted like the manhole covers. I know that I talked to Chief about the AT&T boxes, the green boxes, to see if we're able to paint those. I don't know if that.
Or
is
maybe some
something
sort
we
of
do.
wrap or something?
Yes.
Then again, we probably have to put something in place before we start that, because it's kind of going to the mural section again. So I think we need to have something in place and decide.
And they did just a stencil, like it wasn't a picture of anything, it was just like an abstract, different colors,
Sure.
like triangle, like whatever. And then this one place, I can't for the life of me think of the city, they did this super hydrophobic spray, and you can take a stencil and you can spray it on like the sidewalk or a building, and it's clear, but it shows the image when it rains. So like you could have like a saying on a sidewalk or something, and you only see it when it rains. It was really cool.
My only thought on that would be if it's hydrophobic, so it repels the water and it sits on the sidewalk. If it were to freeze, it might cause a
Well, you
problem.
always gotta be negative. You don't know it does that.
I'm just saying.
I'm just
That's
saying
what
it doesn't.
hydrophobic.
No, it
I don't know,
doesn't.
maybe.
It doesn't mean that.
I'm
So-
okay, I'm all right.
Whatever.
So The next thing I had, and Chief, I don't know if we could do this, so, one of the communities had like a mobile vehicle and they wrapped it in, I don't even know what they wrapped it in, something that you could write on it with, dry erase marker, like a whiteboard type thing.
Okay,
And it was just like a public van, so say like you're at the baseball game, like a council member or somebody else could go with you and they like sit there and they like, if people have questions or whatever, the van is there. If they don't want to ask you questions, there's like this big spot on the van where they can write their comments or something like that. I don't know if we could use like one of the vehicles that we don't use. Something, I don't know.
I'm not aware of any vehicles we don't use, but,
Like the ones that we're gonna go to auction or whatever that have just been
Okay.
sitting for,
and we would drive these to just different events and leave them, or
yeah.
who would drive those?
Well, it could be a department head, it could be the city manager, it could be members of council. I don't really know. I would have to go back and figure out what city that was to see.
I might have missed it when you were saying it, but what was the purpose of the actual van again?
So like we're out there, like we're more present, like,
Oh, I see, like, we would, like, NRBC the van, I gotcha.
but it doesn't necessarily have to be the NRBC, it could just be the city. So say if a council member wanted to go with you to a baseball game, they could park the vehicle there. If anybody had questions, wanted to know something.
For those people who don't wanna come up and ask them, or you're just, yeah, I'm sure if a councilman wants to attend, I'm sure we could probably figure something out.
Yeah, I just thought it was a cool idea because they would park it somewhere and like people would have like a question or a comment, or they did like a generic, tell me something good you did on the side of the van, like, and you could write, you know, stuff like that. Just, I mean, it would have to be tweaked a little bit, but I didn't know if that was something that we could do. And Councilmember Lundberg also brought up the, where's my notes? So we have the chairs and the benches and stuff for like memorial. If we did the boards for the Riverwalk, if we had plaques on that, like people would purchase that and put, not plaques, but they would put their,
Donated by.
yes, on that. And then when you get 50 or 100 or whatever, the DPW can like finish the Riverwalk, you know what I mean? So I don't know if that's something we could look into.
Is a Riverwalk considered a park?
Yes,
As-
they claim it as far as on the website, as far as beaches and river walks are claimed as parks.
Okay. That's all I got.
Chief?
Couple things, I gave you guideline number 11 for murals, this is from the historic district. Teresa, our planning director, discussed the possibility of murals at her last meeting. So there's already existing guidelines, and it sounds like she gave me a copy, and again, she gave this right before the meeting here this morning. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here, but spoke with the commission regarding murals. Historic district, there are currently guidelines in place. The commission has generally been positive regarding murals. The commission will be open to hearing proposals for murals in the future. So it sounds like there is a path and a policy governing this already. So as far as having murals in the historic district, it sounds like there might be a path moving forward.
Could be a good start.
And we might look at these to help guide if we decide to have a policy procedure for murals in the city.
That's a good idea.
Number two, who do we need to be here for our next meeting?
I think we
So I have
need,
clear direction. What's that?
I think if we wanna keep moving forward on these ordinances, I'll put 650 and 1454, and then, by our next meeting, council will be talking about sidewalks too, right?
Yes.
So should we talk about sidewalks and?
Well, we're already, do we have another meeting this month?
No.
No, so we've already talked about sidewalks and weeds and,
Good.
no, city council.
Oh.
I don't know what, I don't, know what the other one, there was one more, I just can't. So basically, the last meeting that we had, right after that, we had an ordinance committee meeting. So Jim and I talked about combining the safety, sanitation, and health with a couple other ones, the sidewalks and the river walk, and nuisances, and I think that might have been it. So that'll be brought up on the 14th in a study session.
So maybe the ordinances that we would review next time would be specifically about the conversations today, but with the city attorney. Would that be?
Well, yeah, because we can't bring it to the ordinance committee if we don't know from the city attorney what we're doing. So I guess kind of the same ones we just went over.
So maybe city attorney and then building inspector would be good to have
Okay.
here for next meeting.
And then third, working in some degree with the planning department, city, and the city manager regarding a chill grant. We drove around, we being I, drove around town and got a list of all the houses that have asphalt siding to see if that's something that might be included. But there might be a time where we reach out to NRBC members to help city residents facilitate the grant, assist with the application of the grant, those types of things. So just putting that out there. This might be a path to assist two of our city residents that this commission has tried assisting in the past and was unsuccessful. So there are different options out there, and we might be leaning on NRBC members to help their city residents just to plant that seed. And that's all I have.
Mary? I just remembered, if you haven't seen yet, the new entrance signs are up. So I think at some point in the spring, I was gonna offer for the NRBC to help do the landscaping work. So just kind of giving you an update on that. I think the signs look awesome. All right.
I have one more question. Chief, do we need to spend our money in our budget? Is that before July or?
For July 1,
Okay.
and I'm still working with the finance department to see what money goes into the budget. Right now, we have $2,500 that we had last year, but my understanding was there was going to be more. And
We voted on splitting the money, so there should be,
So-
I think, 7,500 in that
yeah,
budget. more.
so once that money goes into my budget, I can report back to this group what our budget is, but until that happens, I can't, and it hasn't happened yet. So, I know right now that we have right around $2,100 of the $2,500. And so it's important for me that I report back to this group periodically, it's what we have for a budget until July 1.
I thought it was 12,000.
Say again?
I thought it was 12,000.
Well, I think it got bumped up to 15 in a meeting, a city council meeting, and it was to be split between the NRBC and the Parks Department.
So,
For volunteer projects?
Yes. So I'm confused on why we don't have it.
Well, I'll get with the city manager and the finance director and see when we're gonna have a tangible number that I can report back to this group on, so that we know what we can do.
Wondering, because that's a lot of money that we need to get rid of before July, if we figure out what projects we have in the spring, figure out what we need for them, so we can purchase them
Right.
spring and summer, okay.
The only thing we know we need to buy is a leaf blower. That's all we know so far, so.
I think we had a couple things on a couple meetings
Alright.
ago that I gotta meet with you on, chief.
Okay, that's all I got.
All right, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second. 10. All right. 11:15.